There we go. Oh, mute everyone, you said?
You
Okay.
can mute everybody. Everyone, you're going to be muted now just because we've had some problems with disruptive people. I mean, people not realizing that their audio is on and getting background noise and things and making it hard for people to talk. So we're going to keep you muted, but during the plant share, if you want to ask questions, feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask those questions. Just a few announcements here. You can see this on the screen right here, what our upcoming speakers are. And you'll notice our February program is Andy Mariani and Charlie Olson. And that's going to be a question and answer format. So we're asking that you submit questions ahead of time. So if you would send your questions to the info email, info@westernhort.org, we will collect the questions for that meeting. And you don't have to wait until a week ahead of time. You can do it anytime. Think of something, you're out there having problems with your orchard, you have a question right now, just send it off to me. Then you won't forget about it. You want to try to think about questions at the last minute, and I'll be glad to collect them for that meeting. And then this is CalHort is having their seed exchange again. And you can submit seeds for the next month, I believe. Send them to Dave Tibble, and there's his address there. There's full information on how to package your seeds and what they want on the CalHort website if you just click on their seed exchange. And then also another CalHort announcement, they're going to be having a plant and book sale instead of their meeting in November, and it'll be at the San Francisco County Fair Building, which is where they used to hold their meetings. They will be requiring masks. And you can get more information about that also from their website. And then they are having their end of year party. It's going to be an online party on December 6th. And that information should be coming out with the emails that we forward for their meetings. So we will start the plant share now. I'll pause after each slide, after the cultural information is presented, and feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions or share your own experience with a plant. I also want to encourage all of you to submit plant photos for sharing. They can be plants that look good in your yard right now. They can be plants that you've seen in other gardens that you'd like to share with us. And you can also use this forum if you like to identify plants that you're wondering what they are, or you want to know more information on how to grow them. And it's a good forum to exchange information with other members. I'd really like to see more people participate. So please, please, please send me your plants. And here's our plant share for tonight. It's going to start with Judy Wong.
Thanks, Janet. And I'd like to encourage people also to please send in photos to Janet too, because I have a lot of bulbs, but I know a lot of you have really interesting plants in your garden. So I'd like to see some of them. But this year was a particularly good year for some bulbs that I've not been able to bloom in the past. One of them is Rhodophalia bifida. And this is the common name is Oxblood Lily. And oftentimes it's red. This one happens to be pink. They're from South America. It's a perennial bulb. It is deciduous, needs full sun, dormant in the summer, but it does need year-round water. And I was a little bit more conscientious about watering this summer, I think, because of the drought. And maybe that's why they decided to bloom. I'm not sure, because I really have not had really good luck with them. They bloom in the late summer, fall. And like I said, they can be red, dark red, or pink. And I happen to have a pink form. So there's a form grown in Texas that offsets strongly, but it's also one that is found also in Argentina. So this one doesn't have much seed unless it's crossed with other forms. And you need to plant it deep in the pots because they'll pull themselves down. So I first saw this at Sierra Azul when it was in bloom, and I begged a pot from them, and he went all the way back to the nursery to find a pot for me. So I was thrilled. And like I said, it hadn't bloomed in many years, but maybe the consistent water in summer did it this year. So I'm pleased.
Great.
Okay, next.
Questions from anybody?
Oh.
Comments?
Anybody else grown this? It's from Chile in particular.
I haven't, but it was several years ago that a friend sent me pictures. I believe it's red in Texas.
Yes.
And she sent me a picture of it and I thought, wow, that's a really unusual looking amaryllis.
I think it is an Amaryllis.
I realized,
Amarylliaceae.
yeah.
Okay. And I hope some of you have this in your garden because this is a wonderful plant, Sternbergia Ludia, from Europe and Asia. Again, another perennial bulb, deciduous, and it's hysteranthus, which means that the flowers come up first and then the leaves follow afterwards. It blooms in the fall. It's a bright yellow. I grow it in the hottest, driest part of my yard, and it loves it. The bulbs are frost tolerant. And it's a wonderful surprise in the late summer, early fall garden. I first saw this one in Roz Bray's garden, and I bought some bulbs from McClure and Zimmerman. And like I said, I put it in the hottest, driest spot, gets absolutely no water all summer, and the bulbs do offset quite readily. I just saw Roz, by the way, last week, and she said to say hello to all her old friends here in Western Hort.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of my favorite bulbs too. And I think I got it originally from Western Hort at some point in time.
I might have sent some in, yeah. Isn't it a nice surprise though in the garden?
And now I have clumps all over my yard. So. But it's great. Yeah, it's like a little present every fall.
Yeah.
It needs absolutely no water. You're right. It sits in a hot, sunny spot and just comes up.
Right, I know. And you feel like, oh, I forgot I put you there.
Yeah.
Do the gophers like it?
I don't have much of a gopher problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but if you put it in kind of rocky soil, does that discourage them, Nancy?
No.
No. Okay.
If they like it, they'll find it. I mean, I have 5-gallon nursery pots, plastic nursery pots with holes that are 3 inches
Wow.
across that they've chewed through.
Ah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Just say I don't have gophers either, but something was one of my clumps in the backyard. I'd stick it in the ground, something would dig it up, and I'd find the bulbs laying on top of the ground. I'd stick them back in the ground, something would dig it up. I finally put 2 big rocks on top of it.
Oh, that's a good idea.
From whatever it was from digging it up. It wasn't eating it, but it was digging it. I'm thinking it might have been skunks, which I think I have. But
Ooh.
I had to move the rocks so it could bloom now, and it seems to be blooming.
All right. This is Zephyranthus candida, and the common name is rain lilies, grows in the United States, Central and South America, and it's native to Argentina and Uruguay. Again, another perennial bulb, and it's deciduous, and it is do best with regular water. Like I said, I think because of the drought, I was a little bit more conscientious about watering around the garden, but this blooms in the fall in response to rain. So I start drenching my pots in like early to mid-September. And after about 10 days, you'll start getting blooms. Then you let it kind of dry out for another 10 days. Then you drench it again, and then you get more blooms. So in its native habitat, it's found along rivers and marshes where they get year-round rainfall, except there's a brief dry period at the end of summer, which I think this dry drench cycle really seems to trigger the blooms. I finally got the watering trip down and kept it mostly dry in the summer with a drench in the fall. And consequently, I got blooms because I hadn't seen these in bloom for quite some time. So I was really pleased.
You know, I had a similar experience. In fact, I'd pretty much given up on it because I didn't think
Yes.
water in my yard. And one of them came up this fall and bloomed.
Yeah. They're called rain lilies. I think I used to start drenching them too late. I think I need to start drenching them like in September because we're still warm. I think it needs to be warm and drenching. So I started a little bit earlier in September and they bloomed.
I didn't even drench mine. It just happened to get some water, I think, when I was watering something around it. But
Ah.
It's gotten very, very little water. So
I don't know what to say.
it's weird.
Yeah, this is a strange year. And like you see, these are my early bulbs. And actually, like I said, a lot of these have not bloomed for me for a few years. So I don't know what it was, but they wanted to bloom this year.
Anybody else with any comments, questions? Different experience?
Looks pretty healthy to me.
Yeah, I'm really pleased. There's some more buds coming up now because I stopped watering and then I drenched it again. And I don't know how long it'll keep doing that.
I guess I'll try watering mine again and see if it gets better.
I think folks have seen this before. This is Hamianthus albifloss. I got this from Bill Kurtz, one of our late members. He was very active in our plant discussions, but he gave this to me years ago. And it's the common name is white paintbrush or shaving brush, and it does look like a shaving brush. It's from South Africa, again, another perennial bulb, but this one's evergreen, has with fleshy leaves, roots, and tongue-like leaves. It likes bright shade. Mine grows under my redwood tree where it does get quite a bit of light, but very little direct sun, sorry. If you do keep it too dry, though, it will lose some of its leaves, and it isn't drought tolerant, which is why it seems to like under my redwood tree because it doesn't frost under there. It offsets readily and grows to flowering size in 2 years if you get like a small offset. The only bad thing about it is sometimes the snails will find it and they'll really kind of start chewing on the leaves and they'll mar the leaves and it won't, how can I get improve until the next year. But it likes being crowded in a pot and it grows, like I said, in bright light. The canopy is like 6 or 7 feet high under my redwood tree. So it's blooming right now. So it's also another late summer, early fall bloomer. And I think I have one more.
Yep, you do.
This is one that I think I got probably at the Botanic Garden. And I've heard that the Hamianthus, it hybridizes and it comes also in a pink. So I'm not sure where I got it, but it's likely a hybrid and it is also starting to bloom right now. So it hasn't offset yet, but Janet's got first dibs on an offset when it does.
Thank you, Judy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I got my white hamianthus at a Western Hort meeting a number of years ago also. And
Yeah, I'll bet I brought it in because it does offset kind of readily.
And I do remember somebody brought a reddish or pinkish one in, again, a number of years ago.
Mm.
I can't remember who it was.
Who else is growing it? Anybody?
I am.
Who's this?
This is Glenda.
Oh, Glenda, hi.
Yeah,
Oh, you have a real nice pot of it. I've seen it.
and I have put an offset into another pot. Excuse my voice. So the main pot has 2 blooms right now, and then the little pot has its own bloom. I think it's the first year the offset has bloomed.
Wow. And are they all white?
They're all white.
All white, yeah.
I'm growing it too, and I also got mine from Bill Kurtz, and it is blooming. And it's one of the pictures that I was going to send you, Janet, but I won't do that now.
Is this Leslie?
Yeah.
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 I think Bill Kurtz probably shared a lot of them.
Yeah, I've got 2 pots worth because it does offset a lot, and one of the pots is pretty big now. So someday I'll bring more in when we have in-person meetings.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I keep mine in the greenhouse, so I don't have to worry about snails.
Ah, and it doesn't get direct sun then?
No, I put shade cloth over my greenhouse in the summer.
Oh,
So
okay,
it's filtered. It's pretty filtered.
good.
Yeah, mine
So I have several blooms on mine.
I have one still.
Is it white?
Yeah, white. It's from Bill Kurtz.
Oh my.
It's always a surprise, it just sits there and does nothing. Then all of a sudden it starts pushing out growth about this time of year.
Yeah, right from the middle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
If we ever start having plant exchanges, I could divide it and bring it.
Mm, that would be
Great.
nice.
Well, if you're really into South African bulbs, I also want to say that the CalHort speaker next Monday, the 18th, is going to be Ken Blackford, who's going to be speaking on South African geophytes for California.
Mm,
Oh, that'd be good.
The Zoom information for that tomorrow or the day after. So
great.
everybody can make it that meeting. I'm going to stop the plant share now because I don't want to keep our speaker up too late. And announce our speaker for tonight.
There she is.
Tonight is our annual Louisa Beck guest lecture. These guest lecturers are someone whom our program committee has selected as a highly regarded individual in the horticultural field. And this program is funded by a generous distribution from the estate of Louisa Beck, who was a Western Hort member who died in 2004 of cancer at the untimely age of 52. Louisa had a strong affinity for plants and gardens. Her home in Willow Glen had a large garden with one of the immense willow trees that the neighborhood was named for. So our Louisa Beck speaker tonight is Abra Lee. We're honored to have Abra coming to us from Decatur, Georgia. Abra Lee is a national speaker, writer, and founder of Conquer the Soil, a community dedicated to celebrating the history and art of horticulture. And she will share her program, Lift Every Voice, celebrating Black Americans in horticultural history. So welcome, Abra.
Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to go on and share my screen. Janet, thank you for the warm introduction.
Sorry, 1 second. We're going to mute everybody. And if you have questions from now on, please put them in the chat. Sorry to interrupt you, Abra.
It's okay. Just give me one moment. I just need to go to the beginning of my slideshow. And y'all can see the slideshow okay now? Does it say lift every voice on your screen?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. All right, we are in there. All righty, we're going to go on and get started. And I took the title, many of you are probably familiar, Lift Every Voice, from the song written by James Weldon Johnson and considered the Black national anthem. And I use this title because I want to lift the voices of, to me, these incredible American horticultural heroes who may not be everyday names, like when we think of Elizabeth Lawrence or Liberty Hyde Bailey. So the people you see tonight, those are the type of people that I put them in the company of. And I want to get started with somebody who just brings the energy. This is the mighty Mahalia Jackson. And this is a picture of her at the March on Washington, D.C. This is when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gives his famous I Have a Dream speech. And she is the only woman who gets on the microphone that day. And the mighty Mahalia Jackson, y'all, she is one of us. She owned a floral shop in Chicago, Illinois, called Mahalia's House of Flowers. And the agreement was, if you purchase flowers from Mahalia Jackson, then she would come sing at your funeral. If y'all can believe that, can you imagine walking into a flower shop and seeing Mahalia Jackson back there dealing with all the beautiful blooms? So tonight, she's going to get us started and we are going to finish it off in the state of California. I want y'all to know I haven't forgot about you. This gentleman, I consider the godfather in many ways. And I want to say he may have been the first Black horticultural hero. I really did some deep diving and research too about, that was around 2010. This is Wormley Hughes. And this gentleman was enslaved on Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. And he was also the head gardener at Monticello at that plantation. Jefferson's daughter wrote that Hughes was always armed with a spade and a hoe. And the work that he did as head gardener at Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, including laying out things like the famous oval flower beds, he felled trees. He also worked with the horses. This is a man that even dug Thomas Jefferson's grave. And he is also a man whose family never saw freedom in the sense that Thomas Jefferson did indeed, many of the people who were enslaved on his plantation, he did release them, but Wormley Hughes's family, he did not. So Wormley Hughes had to buy back his own family's freedom. So when we think about estate gardeners, and that's how I think of Mr. Hughes, I think about how extensive the gardening is at Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. And I've been an estate gardener, and someone like Wormley was doing an incredible amount of work there. And we can't just reduce his life to being an enslaved person. This is a man that would have been making plant choices, that would have been laying out designs, that would have been propagating plants as well. So we have to be really broad about who we consider plant experts from the past. And being enslaved does not mean that you were not a plant expert, because of course he was. Now we're going to Washington, D.C. So just west of Virginia, of Monticello. And this is a picture from Harper's Weekly, 1870, June of 1870. And one of the reporters, journalists, has the wherewithal, the artist, to capture the Black women who are the flower sellers in downtown Washington, D.C. They set up shop in front of the Potomac River. And when they come into the city, they bring their plants in on these white horses, horse and carriage. And they are even compared to the famous flower vendors in Rome. So spring does not arrive until these women arrive. And I want y'all to really, really look at this picture, because these aren't just flower sellers. These are mobile nursery women. These are potted plants. You see cut flowers. You see little specimens of plants. So we have to be, people weren't going to Home Depot, y'all. They were going to these women to purchase the plants from, and just beautifully, beautifully dressed. We also have to remember that this is 5 years after the emancipation of slaves in America. And these are self-employed women, and many of them grew their own plants on farms in rural Virginia. And also, I want to point out, this is just a true community and sisterhood in this picture. It's just honestly, honestly stunning. And you can even see with their dress, the headdress around them, you can almost see the remnants of galays, which you would see African women wear, which would have been their ancestors as well. Now, this handsome fella here is Mr. Malcolm J. Stubblefield. So I don't know if any of y'all have any connections to Iowa, but this is where this gentleman is from. And he graduated from Iowa State University. And after graduation, somewhere around that time, he makes his way out to New York City a few years later. And in New York City, he becomes a gardener who is responsible for the beautiful landscape that we see at the New York Botanical Garden. And this is in the mid-1930s. Malcolm Stubblefield also goes on to work with the Parks Department in New York City, and he eventually makes his way down to Washington, D.C., and is actively involved in politics. And I had the pleasure of speaking to his son, and what he was telling me was that he was so active and so well known in those circles, he and his wife, that when President Kennedy died, Malcolm Stubblefield's wife was called to the White House to be there with Jacqueline Kennedy, or when he was assassinated. I shouldn't say he died. He was absolutely shot and killed. But this is the type of thing I want y'all to understand about these people. They had incredible plant skills and plant knowledge and incredible careers, but also the details of their personal life are stories that we miss out on when we aren't able to capture them and interview them while they're still alive. So Malcolm J. Stubblefield, Sioux City, Iowa's finest, and head gardener at the New York Botanical Garden. And another head gardener, so we've gone from Monticello and Wormley Hughes to Malcolm Stubblefield, NYBG. This is Mr. Sylvester Owens, representing for the great state of North Carolina. And this gentleman is considered the Azalea King. He is at the one-time chauffeur of Chauncey Beadle, who was the previous head gardener at Biltmore Estate, the famous Canadian horticulturist, moves to America, moves to North Carolina, great friends with Sylvester Owens. I mean, they are just like pilot and co-pilot all the time, hanging out. And Sylvester Owens becomes an expert on the plants as well. And he's even in part of this plant hunters group with Chauncey Beadle, and they ride throughout the southeastern states identifying azaleas, camellias, all the type of shrubs that you would see at a place like Biltmore in the Piedmont region. Now, with Sylvester Owens, you'll notice this is, let's just keep it real, this is a light-skinned Black man, and he is almost to the point where he is white passing. And there were many times when he was traveling with the other plant collectors, he would even have to tell the hotel clerk, hey, I have to be in the rooms where the Black people are. So that was something that in many ways may have allowed him to be in many places and to have the career that he had, because sometimes people just did not even know that he was a Black man, and he identified as a Black man. So I'm telling you this because colorism does play a role in horticulture, in landscaping, and in these communities. So when we're talking about these conversations, even sometimes uncomfortable conversations, we have to speak to the nuance to it as well. Now, as the Azalea King, Sylvester Owens also taught classes throughout the state of North Carolina, and he passes away in the 1980s. And I know his niece, my mom's best friend is his niece, and she told me that when he passed away, you could not even get into the church because so many flowers came from all over the world. And that was a level of respect that other horticulturists had for Mr. Sylvester Owens. Now, this gentleman is Thomas Queen, and this is a really grainy picture of him, but I hope you can see it because it's really important. This is taken in 1920, and in 1920, Thomas Queen is 86 years young, and he is running his own greenhouse and nursery. This is a gentleman who was born into slavery, and he was also a gardener at the State House at the governor's mansion in Annapolis, Maryland. And the way that he really gets into and excited about plants is that someone throws a geranium cutting into an old ash pot, and he nurses this geranium back to health, starts growing his own plants, and says, you know what? I'm going to be a nurseryman. That's pretty much what happened. And so he ends up shipping his plants throughout the state of Maryland from Baltimore to Annapolis and has an incredibly successful career. As you can see, running ads in the paper and quite regularly, I may say, and those things are not cheap to do. And again, this is the type of small business that people, Black people, perhaps even white people in Maryland, all people were getting their plants from, people like Mr. Thomas Queen, the exceptional nurseryman. And florist, by the way, as well. So up to Harlem, New York. Y'all know this got to be Harlem. Who else would just be this fabulous? And the fabulous woman that you see here, this is Mrs. Lucille Kane. Now, she is someone who is a migration child. She born in the South, migrates to New York, marries into the floral business, and then launches her own successful floral shop, and is a member of many floral and horticultural associations. This one in particular is a picture from the Metropolitan Florist Association, and she has entered the contest for most originality, and she wins it, and she is the only Black woman that is present at this show. This is in the 1940s. Now, Lucille Kane is wearing a hat with 300 orchids on her head, and there are 15 Hawaiian orchids at the top. And I just think she is so fabulous. And that's probably one of the coolest horticulture pictures, floriculture pictures we might have in existence in this United States here. Ooh, too fast on the, I was about to say too fast on the trigger there, which is kind of a lame joke, but I really was thinking, well, I was just too fast on my trigger fingers there. This picture, some of you all may recognize, is the legendary Mary Fields, also known as Stagecoach Mary. And that's exactly what she did. She ran a stagecoach, born in Tennessee, born into slavery, moves west out to Montana, and is having to fight off bandits and wolves and the weather so everybody can get their mail. she is beloved in the town of Cascade, Montana, where she eventually settles. And she has a really just incredible story in between, but we're just going to focus on her contributions to the world of horticulture today. And this is a woman who wouldn't miss any shot within 20 paces. This is a woman who could drink at the saloons for free and eat at the restaurants for free. That is how beloved she is in the town. And she especially loves the Cascade, Montana baseball team. And what she does, the term that is used is she's a team mascot, and that is not meant and I don't perceive it to be in this specific case a derogatory term. I think it could be a better word for it though, but that's the word that's written. But you can tell she's pretty much like the big cheerleader of this baseball team. She loves them, she adores them, and they love her right back. Now, before every baseball game, she makes a posy for each player on the Cascade, Montana team, and also each of the visiting players. And then she makes these 5 large floral bouquets for anybody that hits a home run during the baseball game. And I also should mention she was known to punch anybody in the mouth that talked bad about her beloved Cascade, Montana baseball team. And this, again, another grainy little photo, but the woman that you see sitting there is Stagecoach Mary. She is in her flower garden, and that is where she is getting and growing the flowers to make these incredible bouquets for the players. So I want to acknowledge her because there's everybody in the legacy of horticulture is not, it's a lot of times going to be self-taught professionals. And sometimes people are just doing it out of love. Many people are. So just warms my heart that many of us have our inner Stagecoach Mary living inside and just want to spread joy and want to spread plants to the people we know and love. Now we're going to head on down to Jacksonville, Florida. This is the beautiful Blanche King Hurston. Now, Blanche King Hurston is born Blanche King, and she's born into a pioneer Black family in Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville is one of those cities where at one time they had the highest population of Black people in America and also the wealthiest. Blanche King Hurston is also what we would call a legacy child of horticulture. And here is the picture on the left is her father. This is Ed King, and he is with a woman named Gerda Meigs. Ed King was the head gardener, the estate gardener for Gerda Meigs and her sister. Ed King also managed the flower and laid out the 5-acre flower farm that Blanche King Hurston owned in Jacksonville, Florida. And this is a woman who was so busy with her work growing plants that she ends up having to bring in her friends, her neighbors to help her do the work. She's also incredibly active in the church there as well. And I should say quite wealthy. This is her, the picture, this is her sitting down, Blanche King Hurston, but the picture you see on the right is Austin Herbert, who is her godson and also part-time chauffeur. Now, I told you her name is Blanche King Hurston, and that is because she is the sister-in-law of Zora Neale Hurston, the folklorist, the anthropologist, the Harlem Renaissance icon. Blanche King married Zora Neale Hurston's brother, John. And so maybe some of y'all caught that when I was saying Hurston so much in Jacksonville, but indeed, that's who she is. Her husband was also a successful business owner in Jacksonville as well. She quite possibly owned the first Black florist in Jacksonville. And when she opened up her shop, she brought out Shields' famous orchestra to play in the streets, and hundreds of people showed up. So Blanche King Hurston knew how to show up and show out and make it all exciting. And we stand. How can you not? She has a chauffeur, for God's sake. So the type of horticultural life I aspire to, for sure. Now, these Southern women, y'all, they are just really iconic. This woman means business. She's got on her silk scarf. She has on her fur coat. And not that I'm an advocate for fur, but this is South Carolina. This is the 1940s. You don't need a fur coat in South Carolina ever. It's not even that cold there, y'all. I know they're our neighbor right to the east. So this is Annie, Mrs. Annie Mae Van Reed. And I'll tell you why I said the Mrs. part. You can kind of see it in the background a little bit. in the grain. It says Mrs. Annie M. Reed Florist, and she is the owner of the Darlington Greenhouse in Darlington, South Carolina. This is a Black woman that owned a 5-acre nursery and greenhouse, and her plants made it all the way up to places like Boston. The governor of South Carolina is one of her customers. She is known all up and down the East Coast. She is a master at marketing, and she even has a cousin who owns his own newspaper up in Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Courier. So Mrs. Annie M. Reed, this is super important because this is also a time where older Black people in the South are not addressed by white people as Mrs. or Madam. Like you think of Madam C.J. Walker. It's Aunt Jemima is a perfect example. She's really not your aunt. She's just an older Black woman. And so the fact that she even puts Mrs. Annie M. Reed on her shop lets you know you're not going to walk in here and call me Annie. We're not friends. It's Mrs. Reed to you. And the Darlington greenhouse, this is some of the stationery well, it wasn't sent to me, but a picture was sent to me by the good folks in Darlington at the Historical Society there. And you can see that with her, when you say it with flowers, you say it with the flowers of Mrs. Annie M. Reed. And I guess she said, you know what, Blanche King Hurston, you and your chauffeur down in Jacksonville, that's pretty cool. But look at my 1940 Ford floral delivery van to get my plants out around South Carolina, out about town. And yes, she is posing, and she deserves to pose, because who else has a nursery delivery truck that looks that amazing? So Annie Mae Van Reed also is a person that was essentially a self-made millionaire. She at one point, her earnings were worth what would have been at the time, I think it was in the oh, you know what? I don't even want to say the year to get it wrong for y'all. But what I will tell you is this. If we equated that money into today's earnings, it would be $1.2 million. It was essentially what she had in the bank is what that would have been at the time. So Mrs. Annie M. Reed is one of the fabulous ones. And I love that she loves to be fabulous. You see how she glows and puts on for these pictures and is giving us a little leg and giving us, you know, a little fashion in the picture before. So just incredible the work that she did, and running this 5-acre nursery and greenhouse. And again, no Home Depot, no local garden center. She is the local garden center. This is David August Williston, another Carolinian, but this time North Carolina, not South Carolina. And he is, many of you may recognize him. This is the gentleman who is the first Black landscape architect in the United States of America. He is a graduate of Cornell, the first Black man to graduate with an agriculture degree from Cornell. Liberty Hyde Bailey is one of his professors, and he is called upon to go down to this school down in Alabama that is specializing in industrial education. And that school is Tuskegee, the house that the Wizard of Tuskegee built, Booker T. Washington. And as we know, George Washington Carver also was down there running the Department of Agriculture. And this is one of his mentees that you see here. David August Williston goes on to have an incredible career, works well into his 90s, lays out the campuses of HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, places like Fisk, part of the Atlanta University Center, Florida A&M University, part of Howard University, and he has his own studio in Washington, D.C. as well. So just a really extensive and thorough and long and storied career, and an incredible plantsman. And this gentleman is also, he's a member of the New York Botanical Garden. He's a member of the tree societies. I can't remember the exact title off the top of my head, but I'm saying this because even with a case like Mrs. Annie M. Reed, she talks about the floral magazines that she subscribes to. So it's not that these folks are just working, they're actively involved. They're like y'all. Like one of them could have been in Western horticulture. Isn't that pretty cool? So David August Williston, the first Black landscape architect in the United States, and a complete icon. Now I want to talk about a Black woman who we should think about her life in her career and the work that she did, because she wasn't considered a landscape architect in her time. And I was having a conversation last week with a gentleman who is a landscape architect professor at Penn State University. And this is Abra Lee Meredith. This is a woman born into Lynchburg, Virginia. She goes on to launch the art program at Virginia State University, an incredible artist. And also, I should note that she lives with her partner her entire life. So a member of the LGBTQ community. Now, Amazingly Meredith is a Black woman that is an architect, and she lays out a neighborhood in New York called Azores North. It is on Sag Harbor. It is a Black vacation neighborhood. And you'll see Azores South. I have a picture that I'm going to show you in a minute. But my point is this woman's an artist. She lays out a whole neighborhood. Her sister is the one selling the homes in this vacation neighborhood for Black people in New York. This is a person who also is laying out the plants that will go with those homes. And Mark, the landscape architecture professor at Penn State, agreed with me. He said, Abra, absolutely, that is landscape architecture. So she's somebody, we need to go back and put an asterisk by her name and look at her work. I mean, look at these planting plans in the background. You can see that that is that type of work. And so this is Azores South. This is the home that she lived in with her partner. And it has become the alumni building, excuse me, at Virginia State University. And you can even see here with this plan, some of the plantings that she's done. So this building is pretty famous because it's a very modern, I mean, this looks like the future. And think about how far back that she did it. She's doing this, I think in the 1950s is when she lays out this design. And this building is also one of those buildings that is protected by the Historical Society, thank God, so they won't tear it down. But Amazingly Meredith, a Black woman who absolutely was doing the work of landscape architecture. She's doing the Lord's work, y'all. This is a person that is so near and dear to my heart, somebody who, honestly, all these people deserve their own hour-long lecture, but today we're just going to go through a highlight reel. But this is a gentleman named Mr. Asa Sims, born in Asheville, North Carolina, makes his way up to Hampton University and is going there to be an artist. But during his work study program, he is assigned to the greenhouse at Hampton University. Now, Hampton University is also the university that Booker T. Washington attended, and he is handpicked to go down to Tuskegee, and he lays out Tuskegee. So there's a real link between Tuskegee and Hampton and Black horticulture in America. It's undeniable, undeniable. So anyway, back to Mr. Asa Sims. Asa Sims is assigned to this greenhouse, and he realizes, hey, I'm still an artist. Instead of painting my pictures with paint, I can paint them with flowers. And he goes on to be the manager of the greenhouse, he doesn't run the extension part, but he is part of the Hampton Extension Service. And he goes throughout the state of Virginia and also North Carolina and teaches horticulture and beautification classes to people. Now, this is a picture of him teaching some of those horticulture and beautification classes. Asa Sims, I have the arrow right above his head. He is sitting there with one of his 3D models. He is known to bring his 3D models of what a landscape should look like and shouldn't look like to his audiences so they can see. So just how we're on PowerPoint tonight, no way, Jose, with Asa Sims. He has built out a model and he is sitting there at that table with it. And look at how attentive and enraptured this audience is in his every word. Now, this is a very big deal because Asa Sims is helping to organize garden clubs in the state of Virginia. And he is one of the 4 founders of the Negro Garden Club of Virginia, at least what we know to be the 4 founders. And this is a state garden club that starts off with 7 clubs. 10 years later, they have about 70, and then they go on to have hundreds of clubs. And the impact goes beyond the state of Virginia. It goes into North Carolina. It goes into Ohio. They have their own federation of garden clubs. Georgia has them. Wisconsin has them. I'm certain California would have had them too, especially in Los Angeles, where there would have been a Black population at the time. Now, this isn't frivolous garden club business, y'all. These are women who are organizing the right to vote. They are active in the civil rights movement. They are demanding that the city come and repair the potholes. So they have power and they know how to use it. And the woman that you see highlighted in pink, that is Mrs. Ethel Early Clark. And she, of the 4 founders of the Negro Garden Club of Virginia, she is the only woman at the table. She is a woman who is an icon in the state of Virginia, at least in my eyes, she is and should be, and hopefully will be. And she's a person who is the first president of the Negro Garden Club of Virginia. The club goes on to change his name as time evolves. And I do know that many of these clubs were meeting, or some of them, I shouldn't say many, some were meeting into the late 80s and into the 90s. The club was founded on April 22nd, 1932. So April 22nd, 2022 is the 90th anniversary of these clubs. So yes, I will be celebrating next April, and April 22nd also happens to be Earth Day as well. Now I want to talk a little bit more about artists. So I talked about Amazingly Meredith. I should have mentioned that David August Williston was also an exceptional artist, Asa Sims, and this gentleman, Charles William Costello. This is a man who really was a successful magician and had a whole magician caravan and folks, I think 17 people working for him. And unfortunately, a fire breaks out and all that burns to the ground. So he's out of the magic business. But he is an exceptional artist. And one thing that happens to him when he's younger is that he's at a picnic and an insect falls into his drink and he's just fascinated by the way this insect looks, as he should, because insects are amazing. So the 1940s are popping off and he's in Columbus, Ohio, and the Work Progress Administration program is in effect. This gentleman does an art exhibition at something that we would call akin to like the YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club. He does an art exhibition there, and one of the professors at Ohio State sees his work and says, hey, you know what? You ought to come draw for our entomology department. And that is exactly what he does. He draws thousands of drawings for the entomology students. And he talks about how his drawings are no different than when people go to war and they want to spy the difference between an enemy plane and friendly fire. So he's stating in no certain terms that I'm drawing beneficial insects and I'm also showing non-beneficial insects. And this is one of his charts that is still preserved and at Ohio State. His niece sent me this beautiful picture, and Charles William Costello caught in action doing his thing. And he also does zoology charts as well. So all of this is hand drawn by him. This is a man that makes his own microscope out of magnifying glasses and works at Ohio State for about 7 years with that department, doing his art and teaching us a thing or two about the insects. This book here, Gladiola Garden, I know y'all can read, you see big old Gladiola, you go Gladiola Garden, but this is super important because it is written by a woman named Effie Lee Newsome, who is an eco-poet, a naturalist, a Harlem Renaissance writer. She writes for the Crisis magazine, the official magazine of the NAACP. W.E.B. Du Bois is her editor. Do y'all see how amazing? These people don't have normal lives. Their horticultural lives are, associated with people like W.E.B. Du Bois. We could never in these days. But Effie Lee Newsome is also a librarian, and she writes for the children's page of the Crisis magazine. And this is a book of poetry that she formed for children. And if you're reading the poem, what she is doing is she's writing it at a time. Jim Crow is at its height in America, and she is comparing the skin of Black children to gladiolas and how they come in various shades. And I talked about Sylvester Owen being a light-skinned Black man. You saw the Flower Women from DC where they were noticeably dark-skinned, or someone like an Annie Mae Van Reed. And she's using this language because she realizes that these are still children, and she wants all children to be able to see the beauty in these Black children. So she writes it that way. So even if you are not a Black child, you see these beautiful colors that are in them. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. And she doesn't just write about gladiolas, y'all. She writes about all seasons, birds, insects, you name it. And this is her picture. And I want to point out, it's illustrated by a woman named Lois Maylou Jones, and this is the second page of the book there. And you even see the range. They're showing a darker Black child and even a lighter Black child right there by the Gladiolas. So Lois Maylou Jones illustrates the book. The Associated Publishers, this is the publishers of Carter G. Woodson. This is his publishing house. Carter G. Woodson is the man that goes on to find what we now know, or found what we now know, called Black History Month. And this is Lois Maylou Jones. This is a woman that attended art school in Boston. She spends her summers on Martha's Vineyard. And this is one of the pictures from the book. And I pulled this out because this is also a time where people are drawing Black people with these exaggerated lips and features and these caricatures. But look how she takes this dark-skinned Black child and just makes her so beautiful sitting there in this perennial bed of flowers. And that is how the whole book is. And it is just, it's dynamic, and it is a work of art. So written by Effie Lee Newsome, illustrated by the incredible Lois Maylou Jones, who also goes on to launch the art department at Howard University, studies art in Paris, and has an incredible career herself. Now I want to talk to you about a woman named Mrs. Pearl Fitch. This is a woman born in Austin, Texas. She goes out to Los Angeles to be a nurse and has a really hard time out there, comes back home to the great state of Texas. I get it. I'm from Georgia. I lived in Texas for 3 years and I loved it too, fell in love with the place. And she wants to find a career that both she and her husband, they love together, because she has such a bad experience with nursing. You know, racism can kind of kill your vibe, of course. And she says, you know, I want to work with him. Let's figure out what we can do. And they both realize how much they love plants. And so they open up a nursery and greenhouse and also a floral shop. And it is called Fitch's Flowers in Houston, Texas. So this is her. And the motto of her shop was, you want flowers, you call Fitch's Flowers. And this is her store. And this is a woman who was self-taught, and she wanted to join these associations to learn about flowers and learn about plants in Houston at the time. And she was not admitted because of the color of her skin. And so one of the white florists in an area called the Heights said, you know what, Pearl, I'll teach you everything we've been learning. I'll do that for you. And she does. I also want to point out that her building, Fitch's Flowers, is no longer in existence. You can see the greenhouse there in the background. This renovation was funded by a wealthy Black couple in Houston. And they help her out because she's doing amazing work. She's also trying to expand her business and get her floral pieces and plants out further through the telegraph service, FTD. But they also will not admit her because she's Black. And so she reaches out to people all over the United States, and all of them respond and say, hey, I'll help you get your flowers out. These are white florists. They respond and say that, but they never actually do it, until one person, Mrs. Annie Darby, shows up and helps her, and doesn't physically show up, but you know, they work this out over the telephone. Now, Annie Darby is I want to say the urban legend, that's the word I'm looking for, is that she is the first person to ship flowers across the nation. She has this refrigerated truck, or this train she has, and she also has the technology. Now, Annie Darby's florist was right there on Hyde Street in San Francisco, 1036 Hyde Street. The shop is no longer there. I know because I rode by there in June, right after I left you, Judy, and today there stands a Trader Joe's. But it was Annie Darby, one of y'all's neighbors out there, who helped Pearl Fitch get her flowers out through the telegraph service, which helped to expand her business. And that is Mrs. Darby. She's older in this picture. She's standing there with her cane, looking just as cute as she can be. And that is a parade float, but of course it's one of the famous San Francisco streetcars. So I think it's super cool how somebody from your area helped Mrs. Pearl Fitch down in Houston, Texas. And also, you just never know what your impact is making for people in other places. So it really doesn't hurt anyone at all to just help and do the right thing. Now, this gentleman here, this is a gentleman named Ham Banks. And that's a really appropriate nickname for him because he is hopping out of his building like he's Godzilla or something. And he is pointing down to the shop sign, the Redondo Floral Company. This is in downtown Los Angeles. And he is a gentleman born in Cleveland. His father is a master mechanic, and he's also an interior designer. His mama loves flowers. And so he moves out to California, also part of the Great Migration that happens in Black America. And a gentleman hires him to be the first Black floral manager in downtown Los Angeles. Now, I did leave this part off. He was trained. The first job he got out there was he was hired by a gentleman named H.F. Warren, who was actually the first Black florist in Los Angeles. Now, this is a man who loved to put on a show. And he loved to go up to Pasadena on the weekends and look at the parade floats, and he would help stir the glue pots to stick the flowers on the floats. And in 1939, he wins his first award for a parade float. This is Circus Days. And this is a picture of the float he works on. And over a 20-year period, he goes on to win 40 awards. So yes, this is the king of Pasadena. This is somebody who in 1950, Hawaii has officially become a state at this point. And this is his float that wins the national trophy. It is called Hawaiian Holiday. And he has strung all of these orchids together to make the palm leaves representing the palm trees in Hawaii. And he strings them together just like you would do Hawaiian leis. Another thing about Ham Banks is that he hires a crew that is made up of Black women, Japanese Americans. So absolute diversity inclusion before that was even a thing to do. And this is just another picture of some of the work that he does. And this float also, I mean, things are moving on the float. You get the picture, but it's just really, really beautiful. And you see this is a real surfer from Hawaii at the front. And then also women from the island doing their beautiful dance and showing off their culture in this float. And in the 1960s, this is at the 75th Tournament of Roses Parade. This is the first time that Black people have funded their own float. And Ollie Matson, who is a football player, his mama just really wanted to have her own or have a float in the Tournament of Roses Parade. And this is a float that he won for called Freedom Burst Forth. So this is a float. It's 1964. Millions of people are finally watching on TV. It's in color. And this is the float that Mr. Ham Banks, one of the many, many floats. Now I said he wins 40 awards over 20 years. I didn't say he did 40 floats now. So he's doing incredible, incredible work there. So that is all I have for y'all tonight. I know I didn't know how long I was supposed to talk. I didn't want to go over, that's for sure. But I hope that there were some people that were new to you, introduced to you, exciting to you as they are to me. If there's someone that you know I should talk about and you want me to share, please let me know, because Conquer the Soil is one big family. And I love to include the Black history garden stories so they can be part of American garden history stories, because that's exactly what they are. And I thank you so very much for your time this evening.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation, Abra. I loved it.
Oh, good. Okay, glad. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I stopped sharing. I hope I did that the way that you wanted, Janet. Was that right?
No, you did. Yeah, you did great.
Okay, perfect. All right.
So thank you. I'm a history buff as well as a gardener buff. So that was fantastic history, and most of those people I hadn't heard of. So that is wonderful. So we're going to take some questions that came up in the chat. First off, we have from Nancy Schramm, who you aren't familiar with, but her father, Ed Carmen, had a nursery around here for many, many years, and Nancy has carried on that tradition in her own family. So basically, she grew up in the nursery industry here in the Bay Area, and she says she's always felt it has been a very cooperative and accepting industry. As you research these Black horticulturalists, artists, nursery owners, and florists, besides Annie Darby, how did you find their white counterparts interacted with them?
Well, with the Annie Darby story, that was a positive interaction. I know that because Pearl Fitch talked about how they became friends in some letters that she wrote. With other people, it honestly depends. Here's the thing, when I found times that they encountered racism, I can't say it was always directly related to horticulture. It could have been related to something else. So for instance, there's somebody who I didn't put in here, I realized I should have, Colonel Charles Young, who was the first Black superintendent in the National Park Service, and is the gentleman who did the negotiations over a summer to protect Sequoia National Park. He was a Black man at West Point, and that's where he really experienced his real racism. So did it exist in horticulture? Absolutely. Can I give you a specific example? Not necessarily. And the experience in the West, now racism absolutely exists there to this day. It's still going to be different from the Southern experience. And what I mean by that is that Ham Banks is out there in California doing his thing, but somebody like a Annie Mae Van Reed or Asa Sims, they are surrounded by Black communities, and they're in many ways kind of insulated, and they're able to be each other's keepers. So it's just, you don't ever avoid it as a Black person in America, and it would be different experiences for different people.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Next question is, how do you approach your research into these people? Where do you find them?
I approach my research into them a few ways. Word of mouth is absolutely one. And there have been many people who have pulled me to the side or shot me an email to tell me about somebody in their hometown who was building a nursery or was a designer. And that's how I found a lot of it. Also, going to libraries pre-COVID, going through archives, going to Harlem, in Atlanta, Georgia, where I am, the Cherokee Garden Library, things like that. And also, how else do I do this? I really don't use Google. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you a good story. So I happen to have this book here. So I was just reading this book on the Harlem Renaissance, just reading it because you can't separate the two. If I'm going to talk about Black horticultural history, I need to deeply understand Black history as well. And I'm reading this book, and casually they talk about how Langston Hughes, of all people, worked on this farm out in Staten Island for this truck farmer. And he also was a floral delivery truck driver. So I'm saying all this to say is that who would have known? But unless you're just randomly reading a Harlem Renaissance book. And another way is I'm a big Zora Neale Hurston fan, and I was reading a book on her. And then lo and behold, about 10 pages into the book, they started talking about her sister-in-law and her flower farm and how she's this big to-do nursery woman in Florida. So sometimes it is, you just come upon it, but I also feel like I'm living my purpose, and I don't know how these people find me. I got to be honest. I do believe I'm getting powerful supernatural help from the Lord, because it's a lot of folks, I have no idea how I found their story, but it found me. And I'm just thankful I was chosen to share it.
That is great. So they find you. That's wonderful. So
like the movie Ghost, you know, when Whoopi Goldberg is sitting there and she's faking like she's a a psychic, and then they start really showing up. That's what happens to me. These people keep me up at night, and I love it.
Build it and they will come, huh?
That's right.
Kind of that. Well, that's really great. I don't see any other questions. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and you have questions you want to ask, you can do so. I'll give everybody a second. But
I wanted to know about Longwood.
Oh,
And-
my experience there?
Yes, and where are you in the 18-month fellowship?
I completed my fellowship in June of 2020. I started Longwood in I think it was the end of May of 2019, and I was part of the Leadership in Public Horticulture Fellowship Program, and it was life-changing. I got to tell you, because I was doing the work I'm doing now, but when Longwood entered my life, that gave me access in a national platform I never, even international, I never had access to. So I will forever sing Longwood's praises for changing the course of my career. I also was able to work for 6 weeks at Chateau Villandry in France and do some historical research there out at that beautiful castle, considered the world's most beautiful vegetable garden. The owner there is Henri Carvalho, and he was wonderful to me. And that was cut short because of the coronavirus, which is cutting short a lot of things these days. So I mean, I just have nothing but good things to say about it. It was the access, the exposure, their library, the people I met. It was everything. And I will just forever, I'll just never forget how Longwood changed my life in a real way.
Sounds like an amazing.
Thank you.
This is Linda Owens. I'd like to know, is she considering writing a book on these Black horticulturists, or a children's book? It just sounds wonderful.
Thank you, Linda. I am. I'm working on a book now. I'm signed to Timber Press to write a book called Conquer the Soil. So if you type it in Google, I write every day. I was writing 10 minutes before I got on the call with y'all, and it is a labor of love. I am it's putting together, it's patching it together like a quilt. It's not like reading someone like George Washington Carver or Thomas Jefferson's horticultural story where it's there. So that is a challenge, but it's also a joy because it's first person research. And I didn't get a chance to talk about this tonight, but you can see how so many of these people knew each other and their lives overlapped and they were in the same places with each other. So Conquer the Soil is set to be published in January of 2023. And it's called that, Conquer the Soil. I think it's the untold stories or the undertold stories of Black America's gardeners, farmers, and growers. But if you type that into Google, you would see it. But thank you for the encouragement. And yes, I'm doing that. And as soon as I can get through with this one, I'll get into the children's arena.
Your slides would make a great children's book.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll look forward to seeing your book when it comes out.
Thank you.
Another question in the chat. How do you have the time to garden and in particular pursue your horticultural interests while doing the speaking and the writing, I guess?
So right now I don't garden. I work for myself through Conquer the Soil, but I'm also a full-time caregiver for my mom. She lives with me and my boyfriend. So I walk her dogs every day. And what I do now is enjoy public spaces. So I grew up across the street from a golf course and a beautiful park. And I grew up on 2 wooded acres in Atlanta. So I really have an appreciation for the nature that's around me right now, because it would just be impossible for me to tend to a garden, caregive, run a business. It's just not possible right now. But I still don't take any of the plants for granted. I actually think here's the thing. Horticulture has been my job since I was 20 years old. It's always been a job for me. So it's actually fun for me to just watch everybody else doing it right now. I love it. I really do.
You can enjoy the fruits of somebody else's labor.
Yeah, I watch everybody out there hoeing and digging, and I just say, oh, isn't that wonderful? And I just get to step back. So writing is my garden right now. I am in the weeds of that.
That's great. And nature is a great gardener too. That is true. One other question, is there a Black horticultural style in the sense there are different culinary traditions?
Repeat that for me. Is there a Black horticultural style in the sense there are different? There is definitely the word that we use now, and I say we use now, we've used this word for quite some time, would be a traditional Black vernacular garden. So that is something I'm going to talk a little bit about it on Friday at this perennial plant conference, but that is something where you would see things like broken pieces of china that may be edging a bed, or you might see the color white show up, and that would be or an iridescent color like silver. And there's a book called African American Gardens and Yards by Richard Westmacott, and then also the work of Dr. Gray Gundaker. I think No Space Hidden is a great book to explain all that to you. So there's a lot of cosmology in there. There's a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of just freedom. These are not restrictive gardens at all. There are also gardens that don't just use the natural resource around them in terms of plant. They use the natural resources around them in terms of what is physically around them. So there was a gentleman I didn't show y'all tonight. His name is Dr. H. Hamilton Williams. He was a colleague of Asa Sims, and he is the first, also a Black man. He's the first person to study Black landscapes. He does this in the 1940s. He does it for his thesis at Cornell, where he's getting his PhD. And he talks about how there's hardly any Black homes without an herb in it growing in a tin can, or without a flower bed edged by painted tires. So he's documenting throughout the South, through this 10,000-mile journey he's doing, the Black vernacular landscape.
Right. I don't see any other questions.
I have the last book you mentioned, Black American Gardens. Who was the author again?
Oh, that's Richard Westmacott. And then also Gray Gundaker has written extensively about it. And then, of course, the pictures of Von Seals, you'll see it there. And that's the type of garden I grew up in. So a lot of people would look at it and maybe even call it a junk garden. And it's interesting because today now we say, oh, it's upcycling and repurposing and all those things. But that is what these Black gardeners have been doing. And you'll see a lot of the heirloom plants in those gardens. So what they call the aristocrats of the garden, because these folks were also working as estate gardeners, and they were the ones bringing home the clippings and things like that. You might see Effie Lee Newsome wrote a beautiful essay called Garden Glory, and she describes in detail grandmama's garden. And she talks about the morning glory, and I want to say the honeysuckle growing over this dilapidated fence, creating an archless rainbow. So, I mean, just really, really detailed. You see marigold show up a lot. You see sunflowers show up a lot, and you see flowers in particular show up a lot. And where H. Hamilton Williams talks about there hardly being a Black home without flowers, there was another Black florist I didn't show y'all tonight, named Bessie Weaver, that talks about how our people, and she's referencing Black people, have always been lovers of music and flowers. So in the traditional Black ornamental gardens, you're not going to see as heavy on the foliage as you are going to be on these celebratory blooms and colors and vibrancy.
I have a
Really
question for
bold.
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
How did you come to your interest and your passion for horticulture and plants?
When I was younger, when I was a child, I grew up in Atlanta, but on the weekends we go down to Barnesville, Georgia, my mama's hometown, dirt road country, where I grew up around the type of garden I just described to y'all. And my dad was director of parks for the city of Atlanta, and I was not thinking about horticulture. I didn't even know it was a career. However, I went to Auburn, went down to school, just was going to college as the next step. And to be honest with you, I was on the bus one day and I saw these kids outside with their clipboards sitting under trees. I couldn't believe they were really in class because none of my classes looked like that. And someone said, those are the horticulture students. And that's how I got into horticulture. It was just, they looked like they were having fun. And that's what it was.
So your dad wasn't an influence in some way?
No, because when he was director of parks, he was I'm talking like I was 9, 10 years old. So that to me was something an adult did. I didn't capture that could be a career for me. I will say this though, when I came home, because I had changed my major so many times and told my parents that I was majoring in horticulture, they were 100% supportive because they knew what that would lead to. My mom grew up on a farm. So she knew I could be a leader. She knew her grandfather was a businessman. He was an agrarian. And my father being director of parks for the city of Atlanta, they knew what that would lead to. I thought I was just going to be a landscaper, which is nothing wrong with that. But I think they saw a much bigger picture and that's how I ended up, I think, getting into airports and Longwoods and things like that, because I believed things could be bigger for me. And that was directly because of my parents' influence and support.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for asking.
So had some wonderful comments. You've been a very inspiring and enthusiastic speaker. We really appreciate it. And we're really glad that you and Judy met each other.
We did. Special thanks to you, Judy. I meant to say that on my last slide. I forgot. Thank you, Judy Wong.
It was so fun. It was so fun.
You're so fun.
Yes, I learned that Abra and Judy met at a program at Filoli for what they called Slow Flowers, which Judy had never heard of, and I had never heard of it when she said it, so I looked it up, and I guess it's American grown flowers.
Yeah, we hung out. We did more than meet. We really had a wonderful hour and a half together. And
We did.
Judy gave us the tour of us. My friend Eve was there too, Eve Rickenbacker, and she gave us a great tour of Lily. So it was a wonderful afternoon.
Well, it's hard to just meet Judy. I know that. She's very inspiring also. So in any case, I'm glad that she got you to speak tonight. It's been wonderful. I want to thank you very, very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Very late.
Thank you.
Georgia, where you are now, so we appreciate you staying up late to do this.
It's okay. I have a flight I have to catch at 8, so I feel like I'm not even gonna go to sleep. I'm just gonna pack it. I know. It's what it is.
And I will say, if anybody's interested, I had a few plants to share that I cut short because I wanted to get Abra on, so she didn't have to stay up so late. You don't have to feel like you have to stay. And anybody else who wants to stay, I will show you a few plants I pulled from my own garden and share my screen again.
Bye-bye, Abra.
Bye, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank
Y'all take
you.
care. All right. Bye-bye. Good night.
Good
Night.
A second, I've got to find the share screen. Okay, this was Judy's last slide. Here's Judy's last slide, and I went out in my garden to see what's in bloom right now also. And this is one of my, I love penstemon. They're one of my favorite flowers to begin with, and this is one of my favorite penstemon, the Penstemon Eatonii, which is a native penstemon, also called the firecracker beard tongue. And I just keep cutting off the old flower spikes. You can see some on the sides of this picture here, and it blooms pretty much from late spring all the way through. It's still blooming now. So, and it grows on once a week drip irrigation. It gets a gallon or two, about a gallon of water a week, and it does just fine in my yard. So it does not need a lot of water. And then this is just a picture. Pretty much all of these things are growing on 0 water since it stopped raining. So in the background, there's a Salvia microphylla red velvet, and then Salvia chamaedrioides, and there's a little Salvia gregae, that kind of purplish color there. And then the straw flower in front, that one I planted from seed last fall. It came up and started blooming about January. It's been blooming ever since then with really no supplemental water at all, which is kind of amazing, I think. And then the Eriogonum fasciculatum, it also has been in bloom since spring, and the flowers haven't quite faded yet. And even when the flowers fade on the Eriogonum, they're quite pretty. So it's another one of my favorites.
54 minutes and 47 seconds.
Very low water use.
What's the metal thing in the foreground?
It's a sundial. It's 2 o'clock. You can see 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Got little out, so the numbers when the sun shines it show up on the dial.
Oh,
Piece of garden art. And then some more very drought tolerant. Again, no water here. The bladder pod, the Peritoma arborea. This is a fairly young one that I planted 2 years ago. I had one in close to this location, and then I took it out, and then I regretted doing it and replanted it a couple of years ago. But it's a wonderful shrub. It blooms forever. The hummingbirds like it, insects like it. And then I have a dwarf Nyphophia called border ballet. And there's another Salvia gregae behind that. And then the Ceratostigma wilmontianum, which I showed. I pulled the flower here. You can't really see the flowers in the background there, but it's the blue flowers that I showed a year ago. It blooms all winter. And the foliage turns a nice purpley color in the wintertime. And believe it or not, behind the Ceratostigma up near the fence is a Berberis aquifolium repens. And I just have a little story to tell about that. It started out repent. It stayed about a foot tall and maybe a foot to 2 feet wide for the first 20 years that it was in the ground. And then all of a sudden in the last 5 years, it started getting quite tall and kind of rangy. So I guess it somehow lost its replicability. Although I did read up on it and it can get larger, but it just never has in my yard. And as far as I know, the watering conditions and nothing else has changed around it. In fact, I took the water off of it, so. And a couple other things with no water right now. And the epilobium actually came up in that bull bean. I thought they made kind of a nice combination. They sort of did it on their own. I have quite a bit of epilobium canum, subspecies canum eteri behind, quite a ways behind this in the back of my, kind of along a wall in the back of my yard. And some of it escaped and joined the bell bean there. And then another favorite Eriogonum is at the top of this picture. It's totally brown now, but it had yellow flowers in the summer. But even the old dead brown flowers, I think, look pretty on the Eriogonum. That's Eriogonum crocatum, which I found the easiest one to grow of any of the Eriogonums. And then the Corythrogene flaginifolia silver carpet in front of it, again, blooms all summer with no water whatsoever. So I just thought I'd share some things that are in my yard that are growing in spite of our drought with no additional water or very little additional water and blooming right now. So that's it.